No, the most dangerous part of Claressa Shields and Papoose walking into the BET Awards was never just the meme of Papoose's face. It was the timing. It was the room. It was the fact that on June 28th at the Peacock Theater, on a night when Black culture was handing out legacy, symbolism, and status in real time, one of the greatest women boxers ever showed up carrying a relationship storyline that immediately became louder than her championship resume. And if you think this is just another "the internet is being messy" moment, I need you to stop right there, because that is the lazy reading. The deeper reading is that Claressa did not walk into that building as just a fighter. She walked in as a brand, as a crossover figure, as a public image being actively translated to the culture by a real PR machine, and the clip that went viral had the exact opposite energy of control. That is why this story matters. Because everybody is focused on whether Papoose smiled, whether he looked stiff, whether the walk looked awkward, whether the comments got too mean, and I'm telling you right now that all of that is surface-level noise. The real story is what that noise swallowed. It swallowed the athlete. It swallowed the discipline. It swallowed the GWAT branding. It swallowed the careful image building that got Claressa from boxing greatness into rooms that hip-hop and entertainment media actually care about. And when we get to the part about Crystal Frost, a veteran sports PR name whose contact information is publicly tied to Claressa's world, you're going to understand why the phrase "publicist humiliated" is less about some confirmed close-up of a woman in the audience and more about what happens when the internet turns your client's big appearance into open-season optics. Personal stakes, brand stakes, culture stakes, system stakes, they all collided in one arm-in-arm walk. And once that collision happened, the entire conversation changed. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now let's set the table the right way, because if you only know the story through thumbnails and screaming captions, you're missing the machinery. Claressa Shields is not some random celebrity looking for attention. She is a two-time Olympic gold medalist, an undisputed boxing champion, and one of the few athletes in America whose resume can legitimately carry the word historic without sounding inflated. That matters because when somebody with that kind of built-in authority enters a hip-hop adjacent media cycle, they are not judged like a normal athlete. They are judged like a cultural character. They are judged like a storyline. They are judged like they belong to the same content economy as rappers, reality stars, podcasters, and public couples. And that is exactly where this gets messy. Then you add Papoose to the equation. Not just Papoose the rapper, but Papoose the symbol. Papoose the man whose public identity was tied for years to Remy Ma and to a very specific Black love narrative that hip-hop media, reality television, and the audience all bought into. Whether that marriage was functionally over long before the internet caught up to it is one conversation. What matters for optics is that the audience still carries memory longer than celebrities carry context. So when Claressa and Papoose appear together on a huge stage, the audience is not walking in fresh. The audience is walking in loaded. They're bringing old narratives, old loyalties, old suspicion, old memes, and old resentment to a brand new clip. That means the clip is already in trouble before the camera even hits record. And then there is the publicist angle. Crystal Frost is not a random name pulled out of thin air. She has been profiled as a serious boxing PR figure and founder of Madam, and public event materials tied to Claressa have literally listed Crystal Frost of Madam PR as a contact. So when people use the title "publicist humiliated," what they are really reacting to is the idea that a seasoned communications professional can help build visibility, arrange positioning, guide narrative, and secure opportunity. But she cannot physically step into a red carpet clip and rescue the vibe once the audience decides the vibe is off. That is the part people in entertainment keep missing. PR can frame the moment. PR cannot become the moment for you. And I think we need to set the truth on what is actually happening here. This is not mainly about romance. It is not even mainly about gossip. It is about brand hierarchy. Is Claressa entering the culture as a champion who happens to be dating Papoose, or is she being reduced to the woman standing next to Mr. Stoneface while the comment section writes the script for her? That is the tension. That is the fight. That is the reason this matters right now. Because the minute the relationship starts overshadowing the records, the belts stop being the headline and the body language becomes the business. And once body language becomes the business, every professional around you is working uphill. So let's get to the visible evidence, because this is where the internet always starts, and for once the internet was at least reacting to something real. The first piece of evidence is the clip itself. Claressa Shields and Papoose arriving at the 2026 BET Awards in coordinated black, walking arm in arm toward their seats. Claressa is smiling, clearly energized, clearly aware of the cameras, clearly playing to the moment. Papoose, or, as the algorithm immediately named him, Mr. Stoneface, looks serious, scanning the room, not matching her energy, not giving the camera the clean, we outside, and we're loving this read that public couples usually want in a setting like that. That contrast is not imaginary. That contrast is the whole reason the moment exploded. One person looks like they're entering the scene. The other looks like they're assessing the exits. And before the y'all read too much into everything brigade storms in, let me say this carefully. A serious facial expression is not a confession, and a viral clip is not a documentary. But optics are still optics. And in celebrity culture, especially at a show like BET, optics are not a side issue. They're the issue. The audience does not get your private explanation first. The audience gets the image first. Then they decide what story the image is telling. So when Captain Thousand Yard Stare shows up in a clip that spreads faster than context, the public does what the public always does. It starts writing emotional fan fiction on top of the footage. The second piece of evidence is what happened immediately after. The Shade Room reported that fans lit up the comments, joking that Papoose looked like he was scanning the room for Remy Ma, saying this was the second clip they had seen where he wasn't smiling, saying the body language felt off, and basically turning one walk into a referendum on the whole relationship. Again, some of those reactions were messy, some were funny, some were mean, and some were pure internet exaggeration. But the important part is not whether the comments were fair. The important part is that the comments were instant and overwhelming. That tells you the culture was already waiting to grade this appearance before the couple even sat down. The third piece of evidence is Claressa's own response, and this is where it gets really interesting. According to the Shade Room, Claressa jumped into the comments and wrote, "Protect your woman at all times." Flat out. Now listen, from a pure loyalty standpoint, that is a solid line. That is a line that says, I see the chatter, I reject your framing, and I'm standing on what I'm standing on. But from a PR standpoint, that line is doing emergency interpretation after the audience already saw something different. She is telling you protection. The audience thinks they saw discomfort. She is telling you firmness. The audience thinks they saw weird energy. She is telling you unity. The algorithm thinks it found tension. That gap between intended message and received message is where brand trouble lives. The fourth piece of evidence is the award result hanging over the night. Claressa Shields was nominated for Sportswoman of the Year, and Aya Wilson won. That is not an insult. That is not a scandal. That is simply a fact. But facts gain emotional charge when they land inside a bigger atmosphere. If you show up highly visible, tied to a hot relationship storyline, and then you do not leave with the trophy, the whole appearance feels less like a coronation and more like a content moment. Meanwhile, BET spent the same night elevating people in ways that felt clean and undeniable. Teyana Taylor got an emotional Icon of the Year moment from Janet Jackson. Doekiai and SZA turned an awkward saxophone playoff into a room-commanding moment. Lauryn Hill got a tribute that reminded everybody what legacy really looks like. In other words, the room was full of examples of controlled narrative, and then here comes Claressa and Captain Thousand Yard Stare serving a totally different kind of conversation. The fifth piece of evidence is older but crucial. Claressa herself had already publicly acknowledged on The Breakfast Club that there were some things Pap needs to handle in his personal life, while also saying we love each other, and making it clear that they speak constantly and are deeply involved. That is important because it means the unresolved piece of the story was not invented by haters after the BET Awards. It was already part of the known public frame. So when people watched that clip, they were not reacting in a vacuum. They were reacting through a lens already colored by pending divorce talk, public back and forth, and a relationship that has lived more online than most athletes ever want their private lives to live. And the sixth piece of evidence, which people keep dancing around because it makes the whole thing feel more adult and less meme-friendly, is the publicist architecture behind Claressa's visibility. Crystal Frost has been identified in boxing and sports PR reporting as a serious operator, and Claressa-related event materials have publicly listed Frost through Madam PR as a contact. Why does that matter? Because it tells you this is not just random celebrity chaos with no adults in the room. There are adults in the room. There are professionals in the room. There are people whose entire job is to grow athletes beyond the ring, to make them legible to sponsors, entertainment outlets, cultural platforms, and mainstream press. Which means when the internet reduces the whole rollout to, why does Papoose look like that? The embarrassment is not just personal. It splashes onto the whole communications ecosystem around the athlete. And oh, do I have more for you? Because the people who want to keep this at the level of, he wasn't smiling, next topic, are about to get very uncomfortable. The smile is not the story. The smile is the doorway into the story. The story is what happens when the unresolved relationship timeline, the old black love branding around Papoose and Remy Ma, the newer Claressa and Pap public romance, and the athlete-to-celebrity crossover strategy all crash into one camera angle on culture's biggest night. And if you're one of those, y'all just hate seeing people happy commenters, I need you to breathe for a second, because what's coming next is not hate. It's context. And when we get to the part about how this relationship was introduced to the public, how Remy Ma detonated the narrative, and how Claressa herself described the beginning of the romance, you're going to see why the BET clip did not create the discomfort. It activated it. Because the cultural evidence here is loud. Start with Claressa's own telling of the relationship timeline. Complex reported that on The Breakfast Club, Claressa recalled first connecting with Papoose around a fight last July, remembering that he came up and shook her hand, which struck her because, in her words, who shakes hands like that anymore? She said he called himself a fan. She invited him to a fight, arranged VIP tickets, and their connection deepened from there. That matters because it gives the public a romance origin story, polite, personal, gradually developing, and told from her perspective as something sincere. That is the cultural softness layer. That is the this is real layer. But now stack that softness next to the second cultural layer, which is the public chaos around how the relationship entered mass conversation. BET summarized that Remy Ma's earlier exposure of messages between Claressa and Papoose pushed the relationship into the spotlight. Complex also noted the chaos framing around Remy bringing private matters public after a few months of Claressa and Pap dating. And once a relationship is introduced to the audience through conflict instead of through a clean reveal, the audience never fully resets. That is just the truth. People do not consume the new couple as new. They consume the new couple as evidence in an old case. Then you get to the third cultural layer, Remy Ma's own version of events. TMZ reported that in May 2025, Remy went off on Instagram Live and claimed she and Papoose had not slept in the same bed since May 2022, said she ended the marriage, accused him of mistreatment, and demanded that he sign divorce papers so everybody could move on. Now, that is her claim. That is not a court ruling. That is not a neutral timeline. That is one public party's telling of a private collapse. But culturally, it did two massive things. First, it dismantled the old, perfect black love framing that hip-hop media had sold for years. Second, it made any future Claressa and Papoose public appearance feel like a continuation of an unfinished episode. That unfinished feeling is exactly what people were watching at the BET Awards. The fourth cultural layer is the way fans compare energy across eras. And yes, that is petty. But do not underestimate how powerful petty comparison is in hip-hop discourse. The Shade Room comments were full of people basically saying, I've seen all 30 teeth when he was with Remy, which is messy as hell, but culturally revealing. What are they really saying? They're saying the public archive exists. We've seen old body language, old clips, old chemistry, old performance modes, and we're using those memories to judge the present. That means Claressa is not just competing against current headlines. She's competing against archive nostalgia. And nostalgia is one of the most unfair opponents a public figure can ever face. Now let me add some nuance, because if I'm going to be the last honest voice in the room, I also have to be honest about this. There is a possible counterargument here. It is absolutely possible that Papoose was simply serious, overwhelmed, tired, or uninterested in performing for cameras in that specific moment. It is possible that people projected too much onto one clip. It is possible that Claressa's comment about protection was exactly what was happening and the internet just did what the internet does. I can grant all of that. In fact, I do grant some of that. But here's where that defense falls apart. Public image consequences do not wait for perfect fairness. The algorithm does not pause and say, hold on guys, maybe he was just in a thoughtful mood. No. The clip lands, the mood gets assigned, the narrative starts moving, and then the professionals have to chase it. And that brings me to the fifth cultural layer, which is the contrast between authentic room command and awkward room reading. BET's own write-up about the 2026 speeches said Doekiai and SZA had one of the funniest moments of the night when a saxophone tried to play them off and Doekiai flatly said, "I'm gonna keep my time." That landed because it looked like command. Janet Jackson presenting Teyana Taylor landed because it looked like earned reverence. Lauryn Hill's tribute landed because it felt rooted in legacy and community. Do you see the pattern? The audience rewards moments that feel centered, real, and under control. It punishes moments that feel like the room and the people in it are not on the same emotional page. Claressa and Captain Thousand Yard Stare walked into a room full of calibrated moments and accidentally handed the public an uncalibrated one. And I know some people are going to say, why are you bringing up other winners and speeches? This is about Claressa and Papoose. No, this is about environment. Context changes meaning. If Claressa and Pap have an awkward-looking clip at a random restaurant opening, the story dies in a day. If they have that clip at the BET Awards on the same night the culture is handing out visible legitimacy, platforming icons, crowning winners, and creating legacy footage, then the clip gets measured against the whole temperature of the event. That is why it hit harder. That is why it felt louder. That is why the publicist angle keeps coming back into the conversation. Because on nights like that, every image matters twice. Now here is the hard gear shift, because I'm done talking about vibes like they exist in a vacuum. The real story is not romance. The real story is industry translation. Angle 1 is athlete brand conversion. Claressa's greatness in boxing is settled. The question is how that greatness gets converted into cultural capital outside the ring. That conversion does not happen automatically. Being elite at a sport and being legible to entertainment media are two different jobs. One is merit. The other is narrative. And when you are trying to do both at once, your publicist, your booking strategy, your interviews, your red carpet presence, your relationship optics, and your social media reactions all become part of one integrated machine. That machine works beautifully when the core message is simple. It struggles when the audience thinks the side story is more emotionally interesting than the main one. Angle 2 is the economy of black love branding and hip-hop media. Let's stop pretending this is some tiny side issue. Papoose's image was for years attached to one of the most marketable concepts in black celebrity storytelling: loyalty, endurance, marriage, ride-or-die devotion. That image was monetized in interviews, reality television, social conversation, and public perception. Whether fair or unfair, that branding created emotional investment from the audience. So when a new public relationship emerges before the prior mythology has been fully processed in the public mind, the new relationship inherits all that emotional debt. Claressa is not only dating a man. She is stepping into a franchise with fan baggage. And that baggage is expensive. Angle 3 is the tyranny of clip culture. Publicists used to be able to guide coverage through outlet relationships, event positioning, exclusives, and print narratives. That still matters. But today, the core product is the clip. Not the full interview. Not the long explanation. Not the nuanced statement. The clip. One walk, 7 seconds, one expression, one screen grab, and suddenly the market has decided what your night was. That is brutal for athletes crossing into celebrity because athletic legitimacy is earned in years, while viral misunderstanding is manufactured in minutes. Crystal Frost or any other serious PR professional can build lanes, open doors, secure placement, and coach message discipline. But in clip culture, the camera can still pull rank on the strategy. And this is where people need to stop blaming publicists for outcomes they do not control. A publicist is not a magician. A publicist is a translator, a strategist, a protector of message architecture. But if the client's most visible cultural appearance arrives carrying unresolved relationship baggage, and the audience has already preloaded its feelings about that baggage, the publicist's job becomes less launch the moment and more limit the damage. That is a completely different assignment. And those are the moments where the internet loves to act like the professional failed, when really the professional got handed a live wire and asked to make it look like a ribbon. There is also a fourth systemic angle here, and it is the one hip-hop channels almost never explain correctly. Crossover access can become a trap if the crossover audience does not respect your center of gravity. Claressa's center of gravity should be excellence, dominance, achievement, winning, and the kind of work ethic that even Janet Jackson used to describe Teyana Taylor on the same night. Unstoppable work ethic. That should be the emotional home base. But if the broader culture gets more stimulation from your relationship than from your resume, then every entertainment appearance risks shifting your center of gravity from champion to conversation piece. One person makes history in the ring. The other gets turned into internet theater at the after-party. That is the split every serious crossover figure has to avoid. And there is a fifth angle hiding in plain sight. The modern audience wants authenticity, but what it actually consumes most aggressively is contradiction. If Claressa says, "We love each other," people lean in. If she says Pap has things to handle, people lean in harder. If Remy says, "Sign the papers," people lean in harder still. If the couple appears together and the visual energy feels even slightly uneven, the audience thinks it has found the truth hiding underneath the official statement. That is what makes this such a difficult ecosystem to navigate. The public no longer listens for clarity. It hunts for contradiction. The second it senses one, it calls that the real story. So here is the truth bomb, and y'all may not like it, but somebody has to say it. The BET Awards did not humiliate Claressa Shields' publicist because of one bad clip. The humiliation, if we are going to use that word at all, was structural. It was the humiliation of watching a carefully built champion brand get dragged into the same muddy discourse cycle as every other public relationship saga. It was the humiliation of realizing that a woman who should have been discussed as an all-time athlete spent one of the culture's biggest nights being analyzed like a girlfriend vlog. It was the humiliation of seeing professional strategy lose a round to comment section theater. And the reason this matters so much is because it reveals something brutal about celebrity right now. Merit is not enough. Achievement is not enough. Even historical achievement is not enough. If the audience senses unresolved story energy around you, it will demote your excellence and promote your drama in the same breath. Claressa came into that night with belts, legacy, legitimacy, and crossover potential. But the clip economy does not care. The clip economy said, "Interesting. Why does Mr. Stoneface look like that?" And just like that, the main character of the story stopped being the fighter and became the vibe. That is catastrophic branding, not because it can't be fixed, but because it is so preventable in theory and so hard to stop in practice. You can prepare styling. You can prepare talking points. You can prepare access. You can prepare coverage. You can even prepare a couple rollout. What you cannot fully prepare is how the public will process emotional residue from an old relationship mythology colliding with a new one in real time. That is where the machine breaks. Not at the stage of planning, but at the stage of reception. That is why I keep saying this is bigger than gossip. It is a case study in how image management loses leverage once the audience thinks it has found a contradiction that feels more real than the official presentation. And let me say this as clearly as possible. This does not mean Claressa is fake. It does not mean the relationship is fake. It does not mean Papoose secretly confirmed every nasty comment with his face. What it means is that their public rollout at this particular event was weak enough, ambiguous enough, and baggage-heavy enough to let the audience overpower the intended message. And once the audience does that, the publicist cannot win the next morning's narrative cleanly. They can only redirect, absorb, and wait for a better moment to restore hierarchy. That is the part casual viewers miss. PR is not about never taking hits. PR is about surviving hits without letting them become identity. The hero resolution here is actually simpler than the mess makes it look. The hero is the disciplined version of Claressa Shields, the version that built GWOT from sweat, sacrifice, titles, and unapologetic performance in the ring. That woman is still there. That brand is still viable. That legacy is still stronger than one chaotic entertainment cycle. And if she returns to center, the relationship discourse becomes a chapter, not the book. Because one thing history always shows us is that people may gossip about your night, but they remember your body of work if you keep adding to it. And that is where the so-called publicist humiliation narrative flips on itself. If Crystal Frost or anybody else in Claressa's communications orbit is as seasoned as the public-facing record suggests, then the job now is not to panic. The job is to restore proportions. Put the athlete back in front of the audience as an athlete. Put the accomplishments back in circulation. Put the work ethic back at the center. Put the emotional language around love and loyalty in a lane where it doesn't have to compete with award show optics. In other words, stop trying to beat the comment section at its own game and start starving it. That is how professionals actually win. Because think about the contrast for a second. Teyana Taylor's big moment worked because the room saw the same thing the story was saying. Doekiai's speech moment worked because the room saw command and the story became command. Lauryn Hill's tribute worked because the room saw legacy and the story became legacy. Claressa's issue was not that she lacked substance. It was that the room saw uncertainty while the message wanted certainty. One person let the image confirm the narrative. The other let the image complicate it. That is the whole movie right there. And if I'm Claressa, the lesson is not never bring your man outside. That is too childish, too online, too simplistic. The lesson is this: do not let a still fragile public narrative become the loudest thing in a room where your career should be the obvious headline. Protect the hierarchy. Protect the center of gravity. Protect the brand that took years to build. Love who you love. Stand on what you stand on. But do not let the audience leave your biggest cultural appearance talking like they learned more about your relationship than your legacy. That is a losing trade. So yes, the right person is still winning if the reset happens. The belts still matter. The resume still matters. The athlete still matters. And even the publicist still matters because professionals get judged most harshly in situations where the client's personal storyline hijacks the rollout. That does not mean the professional is washed. It usually means the professional has work to do, and serious professionals love work. One person built a career off excellence. The other got turned into a meme for one walk. The trick now is deciding which of those two realities gets to dominate the next 6 months. And this is only the start, because there are at least 2 concrete developments everybody should be watching from here. First, what happens with the public-facing relationship language? Does Claressa keep doubling down in interviews and comments, or does the messaging get tighter and less reactive? That will tell you immediately whether the team learned from the BT moment or whether they're still letting the internet lead the dance. Second, what happens with the unfinished Papoose Remy chapter in the public mind? Because until that story feels emotionally settled for the audience, every Claressa and Pap appearance is going to be graded through comparison, suspicion, and nostalgia whether they like it or not. And I would also keep one eye on Claressa's next major public appearance outside of boxing itself. Not the fight, not the ring walk, not the weigh-in, the cultural appearance. The interview, the red carpet, the crossover platform, the entertainment event. That next moment is going to tell us whether the BET Awards was just one awkward algorithm meal or the beginning of a larger identity problem. Because a brand can survive a bad night. A brand can absolutely survive one viral overread. What a brand cannot survive is repeatedly handing the public the same unresolved emotional puzzle and then acting shocked when the public keeps solving it the wrong way. So if you've made it this far, you already know this was never just about a smile. This was about the collision between championship identity and celebrity optics, between public love and public memory, between professional brand management and a clip economy that feeds on contradiction. And that is why the next video you need to watch is the one about how hip-hop keeps turning public couples into full-time content before the paperwork, the healing, or the narrative transitions are actually complete. Because the shock is not that one couple went viral. The shock is how often the culture mistakes unresolved branding for romance and then acts surprised when the fallout gets uglier every time. That one is going to connect even more dots than this did.